Welcome to this session. So it's the last day of the festival, and I'm sure you've been around and deeply engaged with politics and history and mighty works of fiction. This is your moment to open out your mind into some extraordinary fiction with a twist and just go crazy with your imagination, because Steve and Hemangini are going to take you to some pretty weird places. I want to start by just saying, by getting a brief introduction from both of you. Steve, you've taken a sweeping saga of human migration, multi-generational, and you've injected in some Chinese hopping vampires. Hold it right there. Hemangini, you've wrapped Bengali Gothic, classic Bengali Gothic, around some very unusual characters and female-centered narratives. So I'd like you both to just tell us a little bit more about that starting off point. Steve, do you want to go first?
Yes, my book is called First Name, Second Name, and it is a 4-generation, 2-migrant family saga set in Australia. The 2 migrant families, one comes from Scotland and the other one comes from China, but they come at different times. The Scottish family comes post-war, and the Chinese family comes to Australia in the Gold Rush, which is about the 1860s, 1870s. And they meet in a far north Queensland town, which is right at the top of Australia. And the child of that union, he becomes the protagonist of the story. And when we meet that protagonist, he is a corpse, and he is walking through the night from Brisbane in lower part of Queensland up to the very top of Queensland to the town of his birth. And he's just trying to work out why he is the way that he is, why he is at unrest, and what he's lost.
And we'll be getting more intimate with that corpse very shortly. Hemangini, do you want to take us into your dark, twisty world?
On that amazing thought. So my story also spans several generations. It's about a really quirky Bengali family set in a place called Chandanagar in West Bengal, which, not known to many, was a French colony. And it's a family of Francophiles. They've changed their names, so names are significant to both of our books, actually. They've changed their name to sound a little more French. The book actually features different generations of women from this family, one of them quite undead and telling the story with a very tongue-in-cheek approach. She loves her family. She's a ghostly narrator. And of course, the main female character, the main protagonist, is somebody with this uncanny sense of smell. So she actually has a disorder called PCOS, and so she has this uncanny sense of smell, which becomes her lens for the book. So the book has a few different sensory threads and things like that.
We'll come to that. One of the characters that I do want to highlight is that sense of place. So the evocative portrait of Neil Bari and Calcutta itself, changing through the years. Can you just give us a sense of how located this work is?
Of course. So Neil Bari is its own character. It's kind of like our Mandalay. And Neil Bari is significant to everybody in the book. It's their ancestral home, which has fallen into ruins. This family of 3 strong women kind of return to it. It is a Bengali home, but as I said, it's a family of Francophiles. It has French gargoyles. It has a random round dome. It's probably every architect's nightmare, but they absolutely adore it. And it's Neil Bari because they're obsessed with Monet's shades of blue. So they're constantly wanting to paint the walls exactly that shade of blue. So it does have a sense of place. Everybody's obsessed with it, but it does have an edge to it. So you'll see little corners where there's somebody, there's an angel smiting evildoers very violently, and the family has a slightly violent taste in art. So that gives you a sense of the atmosphere.
Yes, and the idea that you just evoked of the family being drawn to that ancestral home is a very strong theme for you. So, and also, where is home? How far back do you go? Can you talk to that theme?
Yeah, I mean, the way that the book is structured, there's a series of vignettes, and the vignettes take place in different parts of the world. There is a vignette that takes place in Edinburgh, in Penicuik in Scotland, and then there is another vignette that takes place in Charters Towers, which is a mining town in Western Queensland, and those 2 places are so different in terms of atmosphere, temperature, the way that the landscape works, and that they kind of highlight the differences between the 2 families, which come from 2 culturally two different places. And then the corpse who is walking through the night, and the night becomes also another character really in the book, because it is a journey that he takes through along a highway that goes very remotely through Queensland, so that you get a sense of the bugs and the trees and the animals that exist in the night alongside this highway as the corpse is walking.
And you've done something quite extraordinary in terms of, I mean, it's a gripping narrative, and the way it's structured just really, really drags you along, and you're just dying to know what's going on. But I especially loved your cultural, your political commentary. Sometimes very light touch, but you have a sort of a double outsider's view in many ways, and that is always a heightening mix. Can you talk about identities on the move?
Yes. I mean, I was very interested in this idea of what a migrant loses when they come to Australia and try to fit in. I discovered this idea, the need to sort of tell that story, because I looked back through my own family tree, and I discovered that of the 40 or 50 marriages in my family tree between the Chinese people, they married, every single one of them married somebody of Anglo descent. So there was this sense of, the political landscape in Australia at that time and continuing is one where there is an obsession with integration.
Or almost a sense of erasure.
It is erasure, yes, and it's willful integration also by the migrant families. So I was really interested in this idea of trying to find, I suppose, a motive for that, or an environmental reason for these Chinese people in particular to say goodbye to their culture and even just their bloodline.
Mm. And I mean, everyone can recall the pain of trying to fit in as a teenager in any which way. But that is particularly acute in the young our narrator, who also encounters sort of sexual fetishization and very passive-aggressive kind of racist microaggressions. These details are so well drawn.
Thank you. Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about how your basic Aussie, your white Aussie, views Chinese diasporic communities? What is that relationship like?
So the character that Bee's talking about, he is also gay. So apart from being an outsider racially, he's also an outsider in his sexual orientation. And so when he goes out on dates, he finds that people are more interested in him as an object, just down to things like his hair and his skin, and it is a fetishization. Yeah. And he feels like they don't see him, they just see his race. And he's only part Chinese, so that it's kind of interesting that they even just can highlight that part of him.
Mm. I'd like to come back to you, Hemangini, and I want to talk about hormones, because I learned a lot. Well, first of all, I want to just thank you for creating such strong female-centered narratives, which I love. But, you brought quite a lot of biology in, and tell us some more about that.
Yes, so this is very much a lived experience. It's been my lens on the world, I think, since I was a teenager. And unfortunately, when I was growing up, there was, and I don't know if it's changed a huge amount currently, there was a tendency to kind of disregard female pain, and you look at symptoms like this and actually not want to talk about it at all. So I remember seeing a doctor at the time, and I've met fabulous doctors after that, but I remember seeing someone who said, it'll just work itself out. And, and you're racked by cramps of, enormous magnitude, and you're suffering, and you're like, I wonder why this isn't taken seriously at all. So what I wanted to do in the book, of course, was not to make it something which was preachy or, at all about her suffering in a huge way. But I wanted it to be known that this was the lens that this particular character was viewing the world from. And she does have a very buoyant quality about it. So she laughs off a lot of things, and there's a lot of humor about it. But, within the intimate circles of her family and friends, they laugh about her period. They talk about their period all the time, and things that people don't always want to speak openly about. And I wanted to create that space, and the hormones, to be responsibly educated about what was going on, and just be very open about it.
So it's almost as though, because we know that in many places, periods are still very taboo, and that women are just told to ignore or be quiet about all of the functions of their bodies. And yet you don't just flip this, you kind of make a superpower of it.
Yes, that's exactly right. And the hyperosmia, that's something I've had for a long time. And my family
say again,
hyperosmia. So it's a heightened sensitivity to smell. And I was saying, I have my family in the audience, and they've experienced a lot of cribbing, a lot of walking into rooms and saying, what is that smell? I cannot be in this room. Can we do something about it? So since I've experienced this, and it's been annoying, I'll be straight. It's never been a superpower for me.
And you've always experienced this.
I've always experienced this, and it's stronger at certain days of the month, and then it's not so strong. And then I would be like, what if this was a superpower? Because I have information other people don't have. I know where you've been. I know where I can smell what you've eaten.
Oh my God. Oh my God.
Wow.
We look nervously at each other. Uh-oh.
I'm worried now.
And I thought it would be
afraid,
fabulous.
audience.
What if she had to solve a mystery? What if she had to kind of make sense of this? It is information.
Yeah.
So that's what I wanted to do with it.
Oh, and by extension, and this is a bit of a leap of themes, but I also just want to give credit to, in terms of sensory perceptions, the descriptions of the food, because all of the Bengali cuisine, and you have Durga Puja and festivals, and it really is a love song to Kolkata. But yeah, I think that also informs the sort of deliciousness and the food in your descriptions. Yes. Tell us a little bit about why it was important for you to include that.
Of course, and I am very much a foodie, and I'm obsessed with food, and I think, I've spoken to both of you, I've spoken to Steve a couple of times, and food has come up. And this is another one of my lenses on the world. So it's smells, it's foods, wherever I travel. So I live in Singapore. I left Kolkata many, many years ago. It's actually been decades since I've been there. But a lot of my formative years was spent there. And a sense of root, a sense of, connecting with the local food, it meaning home, it meaning family. This was definitely a part of, whatever I wrote. As you said, it is a love letter to Kolkata and West Bengal. And I may have overdone it a bit because I have friends who read the book and they were like, I'm salivating, I need this food. Where do I order this? Is there a Bengali restaurant?
That's a tribute, definitely. But I'm really curious about this idea. I've been thinking about this a lot recently, the idea of the yearning, the pull to a place that you haven't been to or you maybe haven't belonged to for some time. Obviously, when we're young, it's all about getting away. But curiously, there's a pull, and this is a big feature towards the end of yours. I'm not going to say any spoilers, but it's the very, very closing image is incredibly powerful about that sense of belonging and this. I want to talk about it, but I don't want to reveal the ending.
That's right.
There's a really important sense of here.
There's a coda at the end of the book, which...
Yeah. I'm just leaving that as a dangling mystery for you all to go, ooh, I'm going to buy the book. And you should know that there's only a couple of copies of Steve's book. So I'm just going to say, get ready for a stampede. Steve, tell us about, I confess, I had not heard of Jiangxi, which is the hopping corpse, the hopping vampire. But I was very much put in mind of Frankenstein. Is that a fair leap to make?
I guess in ways, because in particular the character Stephen Boland, he becomes the corpse. He is very obsessed with the way his body works as a corpse, yes. and the way that his body disintegrates on the journey north. So he's kind of
the journey north, just like Frankenstein.
That's right, yes, yeah. And he's in a race against time, really, because he is disintegrating as he walks, and the bugs are attacking him and that sort of thing. So it is that, but the juncture is it is a mythical character from traditional Chinese, from mythology, from about the Qin dynasty, because there were a lot of itinerant workers who were working far away from home, and there was a worry if they died away from home and their body couldn't be transported back to the home, the place of their birth, that they would be at unrest for the rest of eternity. So they created this sort of myth. There was a mini industry actually set up of returning bodies back to the town of their birth, but they had to do it. They couldn't, if they were poor, they couldn't do it on horses or carts. They used to walk them through the forest and through the night. And they walked them through the night because...
Lifted on bamboos.
Lifted on bamboo, suspended so that they were upright, and sometimes a couple of them in a row, and they would walk them at night because they didn't want them to decay, because of the heat of the day. So people would see these processions of corpses and they would think, oh, that's some weird supernatural being.
But you also created a very powerful sense of othering and the politics of othering, because, and just like Frankenstein, the creature has the self-awareness of connecting to other beings and then begins to realize the effect that they have on other beings, which is revulsion and rejection. And that's very, very powerful. And I wonder where that comes from. I wonder if, again, we're, in the conversation of political othering and
Yes.
examining that response of fear.
Yes, well, I was interested in this idea of self-loathing because racially and sexually, that character has self-loathing. And the self-loathing relates so specifically to the body in the case of his racial background, in that he was looking at himself in the mirror and he was looking at aspects of his hair, his eyes, his skin, and he was not liking them. He was loathing them because of environmental factors that made him not like that part of himself. And he was leaning into his Anglo background at the expense of his Chinese background. So this idea of self-loathing, I thought, could be really expressed by the concentration on the body as it's decaying, as the corpse is walking north, and also sexually as well.
Yeah, that's exquisitely captured. That it's almost a glimpse of the horror that he experiences when someone. Yeah, I found that really amazing. In terms of diaspora, I want to connect again because like as you've mentioned, you start very, very far away, and then we have this sort of these sparkling links in the chain that result in our narrator that connect way back and around the world. And it was interesting. I went to Tash Orr's beautiful presentation yesterday, who's also of a completely different nationality, but also of Chinese diasporic heritage, and also talked about erasure and that process taking place. And I'm fascinated. I really, can you tell us more about how, is there a wider consciousness now pushing back against this? Do you feel that you're connecting to other areas of writing or cultural pushback against
Yeah, in Australia especially, yes, because there was, the Australian history is very Anglo-centric. It centres the English and the Irish who came to Australia. But they weren't the only colonisers who came to Australia. In fact, there have been waves of migrants. Australia is built on the idea of migrants and needs the migrants. And yet there's this feeling in Australia that if they get the migrants in, then they at least need to integrate the migrants. And so there is not a great history of the Chinese in Far North Queensland. At some point in Far North Queensland, there were more Chinese at the Palmer River goldfields than there were Europeans in all of the northern half of Australia. And nobody knows this because it's an inconvenient truth.
And there's a real tension, and this is pretty much everywhere, there's a real tension between how much should people integrate, how much should people be like other people? Because if you're too much of yourself, then the mainstream, it presents as a threat. We're seeing this with, there's an obsession in Britain currently around migration and, should they speak English? They. Yes. So to what extent, there's an interesting tension there.
It's that word harmony, which comes up a lot in Australian politics. We want harmony in Australian politics, but what they really mean by that is they want integration and erasure. They actually do not want to have the full gamut of cultural and linguistically diverse experience known as the Australian experience. It's such a shame because there is so much to gain from it.
Introduce us to the relationship between Ollie and Laura, because I very much enjoyed this. There was no kind of Mr. Right coming galloping in terms of narrative development. Yes. It's about that key friendship, isn't it?
Yes. So it is definitely about that key friendship, and it's interesting because they, of course, they're sisters. To all effects, they're sisters. But Laura actually came into the family as an underage domestic at Neilbari. And Fishy, who's Ollie's aunt, was outraged by the injustice of it, and she took her up. And it's interesting, the dynamic of the three, actually, because the two have, of course, this really close friendship where Laura is super protective of Ollie. The first time they met, she looked at her. They're both orphans. She met her, and she took her under the wing, even though she was from a much more disadvantaged position. And it was always her looking out for Ollie, taking care of her, being protective towards her, being basically the older sister. And that kind of spreads through the entire narrative because Ollie has this superpower, but she's also, so I like to compare her a little bit to a female Bertie Wooster, so I was hugely Wodehouse inspired as well. I loved that growing up. She has a little bit of that irresponsible younger sibling thing going. So while she has the information that could solve this mystery, there's Laura who's actually driving it, who's actually motivated by wanting to clear their aunt's name of, she's a suspect in a murder and things like that. So carries through, and it just really forms the basis of it. And all romantic relationships are actually secondary in the book, and romantic love is actually insignificant to most of the characters in the book. So they walk in and out, and they're just sort of extras.
Yeah. I want to talk about, both of you have had, and I love this about writers, I always like knowing what their previous lives were. And you've both had a proper go at a previous life before you were a writer. And I think you kind of have to as a writer. You've got to have walked some different roads. Tell us about that route into. Is it? I mean, for you, I sense it was a bit of an escape, like a parachute jump.
Yes, yes.
There isn't necessarily a logical progression there, but are there any ways in which your previous lives inform this?
Yes, absolutely. And so, like you said, it is. My previous life was about people development and, like looking at people's lives rather closely, looking at their potential, looking at attributes and qualities. And I think the more time you spend with humans of all kinds out there, it informs you of personalities. You look at someone and they surprise you, and that becomes somebody who could be a character at a later point. And I really like the word escape that you used as well. So my foray into writing, as they mentioned in my bio, was quite a bit into a previous career, 16 years of doing something very different. And I started writing as an escape. I think it was an afternoon where I didn't want to have lunch with a particularly toxic coworker, and I said, I have something to do, and I walked off with my laptop for 45 minutes.
So
and I
push
said,
and pull factors.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. And I went off and I wrote something, and I said, where would I rather be? And I created a world. And I said, hey, this is fun. Of course, at that moment, not knowing ever that I would show this to anyone or that it would become something. But yeah, so it was an escape. It was a warm, fuzzy, happy place, and that's how this came about.
Okay. And Steve, your journey?
Yes, I've always been a writer because I've been an advertising copywriter, but it's a totally different form.
Well, you're very rude about it, because I
Well,
asked you about this.
Yes, well, it is. I mean, it is a different form because in advertising copywriting, you distill from a complex idea down to something very simple. But when you're writing a novel, you're taking a simple idea and you're trying to flesh it out and give it nuance and difference. So
I have to say, I take great joy at sentence level in your craft, because it's clear. I mean, the copyright. I think it served you very well. And I don't normally quote Ernest Hemingway because I think he's a dick. But one thing he did say that was great was, and I think the quote is something along the lines of, write as though you were sending a telegram. Obviously, young people don't know what a telegram is, but you had to pay for each word. So each and every word had to be paid for. And when someone has practiced the craft of copywriting, every word has to earn its place.
yes, I had to actually work hard at turning it into a book. Like, I had to flesh it out more, but that is my tendency, is to be quite succinct with what I'm
Do you start big and cut down?
No, I've just learned to be able to write succinctly and actively. But the other thing is, when you work in advertising, you're an observer. You have to be an observer of people because you have to find the angle that the people are going to relate to. So you have to understand people. And I think it's a great grounding for being an author, because you're writing about people and all their complexities, and being a copywriter means that you understand a whole lot of different people. You have to write for pensioners, you have to write for children, you have to write for men, women, you have to write for people who are interested in banks, people who are interested in casinos. You just have
You keep all of that in mind as you're writing. You have that kind of raw nerve of openness.
I think it's I'm just if I'm out in the world, I'm just observing people all the time, and I'm noticing little things that they do, and I think, oh, that's a funny little vignette. So I collect vignettes of people and little behavioural things that they do, and I think, well, that will come in handy somewhere.
Yeah. Hemangini, I'm haunted by. I want to get us into classic golden age Bengali crime, and a haunting image for me. I'm not going to give any spoilers, but the image of a body entwined in a tree, take us to that place
Yes.
and expand from there.
Yes, and that was actually like the catalyst for things that followed and that really set the mystery into motion. And I often think of it almost like, like a Shakespearean ghost coming back for revenge, like, like Hamlet's father coming back and saying, hey, avenge me, or, the spectre at the feast kind of saying, be guilty. So there is this image, this skeleton, I can talk about it because people have talked about it, a skeleton that was discovered, as she said, in the roots of a tree. And while, of course, it was very golden age crime, classic, just literally a skeleton in your backyard, I think I was also inspired by rock and roll. So I had a very Guns N' Roses image in my head, and I thought it would be really lovely to have this image of a skull, and then there's vines growing around it, and it's beautiful in its own way. And
so gothic.
It's so gothic. Yeah. And one of the bits I personally liked is the narrator, who's the mother, and she has a backstory, but she's never been to Nilbari. She's connected with this family, but she's never been there. And she died before she could go there. And she feels a pang of envy for this skeleton because he belongs. Nobody knows who the skeleton is at this point.
It takes the roots thing very literally.
Takes the roots thing very literally because he has a place. This home has accepted it. The roots have entwined around him. And she said, me, who I am a part of this family, I have never been accepted. So I thought that was like an interesting, when I wrote it, and I felt like I was actually really feeling that pang of belonging and how she didn't have it, but this unknown skeleton had it.
Yeah.
So
yeah, beautiful. Thank you. Both of you have exploited the notion of the supernatural. Why? When you're working with fiction, you could have told the stories without a supernatural element, and you've brought in, you've gone this also, and like what is that function for you?
Well, for me, it was trying to find a way to explain the depth of emotion in that character, because what happens to him is very subtle. You talked earlier about microaggressions and those sorts of things. These are just subtle things. They're just small things that happen. And the way that the family's history unfolds, there are just little minor incidences. They're not massive epic dramas. They're just small things. And if you were just looking at those things on the surface, you would think, oh, that's not really that something to get that upset about. But when you're feeling it, yes, and when you're feeling it personally, it's always bigger than how you can explain it to other people. So I was trying to find a method that I could convey this really deep and personal feeling of self-loathing. And so I thought horror as a genre, and body horror in particular, gives you the techniques because it's also overwrought and the emotions are so full, and you don't have to be subtle about them. So I thought I would dip into the genre of horror for that character to use those techniques. In literary fiction, you don't see that, so
Yeah, and it was quite brilliantly successful, I have to say. Hemangini, for you.
Yes. And so for me, again, coming from a very different place, so the ghosts in my book and all the supernatural in my book have a sense of inheritance about them. They're all familial ghosts. There's the mother. There are other, alleged ghosts, I'll let you figure it out for yourself, who are related to the family. So they inherit this home, they inherit the ghosts. And there's a sense of warmth about it because there's even a point where, the aunt refers to the ghosts and says, hey, she's my grandmother's sister. And, she's just here because I'm wearing her favorite bracelet and she'll be gone. And there's a comfort with that, which is actually something that we do have in Bengali culture a lot. A lot of literature references ghosts, not necessarily as horror, but as friendly ghosts, as people who look out for you. And I think it exists across other cultures as well. There was one other element I wanted to bring in because which I could do because the narrator was a ghostly mother, was that I wanted the narrator to have this tone where she could laugh at death. So whenever you see a death scene, there are readers who've come up to me and said, I was laughing, but I felt a little guilty because, you cracked a joke about death, but then it's in the voice of the mother who's experienced it all. And so she can laugh at death. She can be macabre about it without it being disrespectful. Yeah, yeah. So I kind of wanted to bring that tone into the book for sure.
And it takes, oh, sorry, I've got a sneeze coming. Excuse me, that was just a little dramatic pause into the proceedings, forgive me. And now I've forgotten my next question. Oh no.
Well, while you think about that, I was going to say that that idea of the ghost and the fact that you bring that into your story. You broke the fourth wall when you did that, which I found really interesting.
And she comes in late. Thank you for doing my job for me. Thank you. Phew. What a comrade. Yeah. So it takes a little while, and then the first person pops in, and you're like, oh, who? And then who's this first person? And then the reveal is that, yes, you've broken the fourth wall.
Yes, and she does say, she says, I'm not a wonderful storyteller. I should have told you this up front. I'm really messy in how I'm telling the story, but it's my story to tell, and I love these people, so I'm going to tell you about it.
Yeah.
So
yeah. I want to ask you about the title of your book and also the title of yourself. First name, second name, and your name is Steve MinOn, which I know you always have to explain, and I know that that's a bit of a burden, but please can I ask you to explain?
No, it's the story of my life explaining my name. I've called the book First Name, Second Name, and there's a reason for that. Because my name, I discovered, MinOn, is an anglicized amalgamation of two Chinese first names. And so the convention for Chinese names is you put the family name first, and then you have the first name second, and then the third name is an honorific. And so when my ancestors came to Australia, they were registered by the authorities in the convention of the Anglo naming. So the second name, which was their first name, became their surname. And so my name is that, and I've always lived with this name that people sometimes say Steve MinOn, which makes me someone from Despicable Me. But I have, for this book, used a typographical method to try to make that differentiation between the two words, because it's two words. But yeah, that's what happened. That's what happened to me, and that's what also happened to the character in the book.
And I just think, the English language is so flexible. And it's just English speaking people that just refuse to accept names. I can't bear it. Like, I've got a friend called Pratiksha, you can call me Pat. And I was like, I will certainly not do that. Just say what your name is and make people learn it. Just a little side thought. I'd like to come now to questions, please, if you have any for our speakers. Please raise your hand. Where are the microphone runners? By the way, are we ready to roll? Yes, raise your hand with a question about our gorgeous speaker. Oh, shy audience. Yes.
Hello, thank you for such an interesting panel. This is a question, I suppose, for both of you. Because you deal with sort of spirits in the books, I wonder if there's ever instances in reality where you sort of see characters or figures from your books sort of cropping, because you think about it all the time while you're writing, right? Does it ever sort of creep into your real daily life?
To what extent are you stealing from daily life?
So I don't know if I actually believe in spirits, but I did have an incident that happened to me which found its way into the book, which is kind of funny. It was with my mother, and we were sleeping on a four-poster bed, like, Fishy and Ollie, the characters are sleeping on a four-poster bed, which was like a hand-me-down from our ancestors. And in Bengal, we use these things which are called mosquito nets. They're called mosharis in the language. And they give you this really ghostly, eerie feel because they're silvery. So essentially, they're hung all around the four-poster bed. You climb into it and you tuck yourself in. What happens, of course, is when you're looking out, everything looks ghostly and shadowy. And I remember we were sleeping one night and my mother woke up screaming. And I woke up with a start and it set me off screaming, and it was actually very comical. And then I said, what was it? And she said, I looked at you and I saw this lady in a sari, and she looked down at you and she looked up at me. And that was the creepiest thing because, I was like, there was somebody leaning over my head. And then she said, you know what? She said, much like the character in the book, you know what? It's probably somebody we're related to. Let's go back to sleep. And she took she said she took like a little thing, which was like an amulet. She put it under my pillow and she said, go back to sleep. It's fine. And I obviously did not go back to sleep. I could not sleep the rest of the night. I walked the corridors. I turned on every light. And she was just back to sleep. She was very calm about it. And she was like, it's fine. I was like, it was hell-raising screaming a minute ago. And so this made its way to the book, but I don't believe in spirits. I'm pretty sure it was like a shadowy something just from the mosquito net. I'll let you speak to that.
I didn't really have a spirit in mind because my character is not a spirit. He is just a walking corpse. But I did spend a lot of time visiting cemeteries, and there's a cemetery in far north Queensland in Australia, which is divided up amongst denominational lines. So you walk into the door, in the gate of the cemetery, and there's the Catholics there, there's the Anglicans there, and over here there's the Protestants, and there is a long track that goes out the back, and at the back of that, at the end of that track, there is a Chinese shrine, and the Chinese shrine has a little tourist thing on it, and it says something like most of the bodies of the Chinese who died in the Palmer goldfields have been buried here, but they've been interred back to China. And I was obsessed by this idea of most, because I was thinking, well, what happened to the others, and why didn't they get sent back to China, and would they be not at rest? So that's kind of the genesis of this
Really
idea.
beautiful.
And the question was about stealing from incidents of real life. And there's some moments, some of the sketches you draw of just casual racism that I thought, God, I bet someone really has said that. And the one that stuck out for me was when someone gives the protagonist a Japanese bonsai and says, "Oh, you'll know what to do with this." It has literally nothing to do with Japan. I wondered if someone had actually said that.
Yeah, I mean, I did write from personal experience because my mother is Scottish and my father is Chinese, and they mirror the characters in the book. So there is a lot of personal experience in there.
Thanks for that question. Any more? Raise your hand, please. Yes, one here, and there's one in the front. If you keep your hand up, then we'll get the microphone to both of you. So yes and yes. So you first.
Yeah. I just wonder, aren't you ever haunted by your own stories? Because just listening to both of you, all of you here, I'm feeling creepy. While I'm finding this discussion very interesting, I cannot make myself go and buy a book because I know what you read just lives in your blood. Like you're just, it's different seeing it in a movie, you just see it and you turn it off and go. But what you read, it just sticks with you, and it'll just haunt me from inside. So when you write about it, I don't know what you do.
Well, neither of us are truly horror. We were talking about this earlier. Of course, I will let Steve speak a little more about his book and how it fits into the genre. For me, of course, there's a thread of humor running through. So I can assure you there's a lot of hand-holding in there, and you will rarely be so scared out of your wits that you wouldn't want to read it for that element of it.
Yeah, I'm the same. I think Hemangini, my book is actually quite humorous, I'm told, which seems weird because there's this corpse and it's disintegrating, and it seems like it might be horrific, but actually it's dealt with. I've tried to deal with it in a way that is just very po-faced. Yeah, and it reads. I'm hoping reads as funny.
The books haunt you in a good way. The next question, please. Microphones, please move a little bit quicker. Thank you.
It's been a wonderful discussion. Thank you all very much. I'm just curious about, we've talked about the importance of names, and just in terms of the titles of your books, when did those titles come to you, and had they changed at all in the writing and publishing process?
So the title of my book was there from the very beginning. It was there from the very beginning, and I knew of a scene in the book which occurs sort of kind of at the beginning, about probably about a sixth of the way into the novel, where one of the characters, the Chinese character, marries a woman from Ireland, and he's told to. He doesn't speak English, and so he goes to a magistrate with this woman, and the magistrate talks directly to the Irish woman, and he says, "What would you like to be called?" And she says, "Well, I think that name, his name, doesn't sound very, it sounds a bit too Chinese. So what happens if we join the words together?" So I was really interested in this idea of names to begin with, because it's like an encapsulation of the kind of erasure that happens in families.
So, and I love that. Just as a sidebar, really quickly, names are super significant to my book as well. Like Olympia is named after Manet's Olympia for a very significant reason. But coming to the title of my book, the Scratch and Sniff Chronicles, this was the original title I thought of. What it meant to me was this slightly whimsical quality, which kind of carries through the book. The main character has a level of immaturity about her. In fact, it's a running theme in the book. People are always kind of knocking her on it. And I remembered when I was a child, there was this fascination that these stickers had. They were the scratch and sniff stickers. And we would exchange them. And the going rate was like, if you had a scratch and sniff sticker, you could exchange it for tons of regular stickers. So there was a little bit of that magic that I wanted to bring to the book, because it was a combination of the scents and, of course, they were being detectives and they were unearthing and kind of scratching through a mystery. So that was the title.
Thank you for the question. Oh, yes, one on the front here.
First of all, thank you for this insightful discussion. And my question is specifically to Steve. So you come from a copywriting background where you have to be very precise with the sentences. So while writing the novel, how did you deal with descriptions? For example, place descriptions, character descriptions. Did it come naturally, or you had to push yourself to expand, elaborate? And what advice would you give to a budding author like me? Like for me, when I write my novel, descriptions are something that I find it a little more challenging to write. Dialogues, yes, I can write it precisely. So what advice would you give to me from your experience of writing the book?
I think you probably just need to observe. Like, you have to train your eye, and this is something that I did after 25 years in advertising. I was able to train my eye to notice details. And it's the details, it doesn't matter how you put them down, but the more detail you put in, sometimes that gives you the picture that you're looking for. So I find it quite easy to stop and to note details, but I also I wrote a lot of TV scripts, so for TV commercials. So often in that world, you have to describe what the camera has to shoot. So if you sort of train your eye to be a camera, then what you're able to do is describe the detail.
Hemangini, do you have advice for a budding writer?
So my advice for budding writers who follow their heart the way I did, kind of maybe midway, is to really look at spaces and things that you really enjoy. Find things you're passionate about. Like, so I nerd out on golden age crime fiction all the time. I do nerd out on my gothic fiction and horror as well. So those things came together. The fact that I've been a fan for so many years helped me imbibe that, and there's a deep love for things that, and I have a sense of, from the other side, of what I enjoy and what I don't enjoy. So for a budding writer, just kind of follow something you're very passionate about, and build a world around that.
We've got 1 minute left. So there's time we can do 2 quick ones. Sandeep is there, and please can the microphone come here so we're ready for the next.
I had a question for both of you. Hemangini, you mentioned that you haven't been back to Kolkata, Chandnagar in decades. And Steve, you talked about erasure, and your corpse is literally on this journey. And in the process of writing the book, at the end, did you have a sense of homecoming for both of you as well?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And I started writing this, I think there were times when I was homesick and thinking about, food and the comfort of home and the banter of home. Even the humor in the book is very much one that you would share with an aunt or a cousin, in a safe, familial space. So everything in my book is about coming home. There's there's a physical ancestral home that they come to. There are pieces of it that, for example, there's a tree called the patriarch, and it's supposed to be like the family patriarch that they never really had, because it's a family of women and not really a lot of strong men. So the food, the culture, definitely. This is why I wrote the book. It brought me home.
Oh, that's a beautiful sentiment. You just wanted to...
Yeah, I was just going to say that I worked stuff out about myself when I completed the book.
Now you've got to read it. Last question.
Thank you for a great session. Usually spooky, horror, gothic stories, there's a sense of loneliness, isolation, tension arriving from that. But in both your stories, there's such a conviviality and welcoming into family relationships. And I just wondered whether you enjoyed playing with those tropes against each other, whether it was deliberate, if you could talk about it a little, and the importance of relationships.
10 seconds, 10 seconds.
All right. Absolutely. Like I said, I started writing as an escape, and I would only escape to happy spaces, even though they had a lot of dead people in them. So they were warm, familial, happy spaces with a lot of dead people in them. And I absolutely enjoyed it. So that was very much intentional for me.
And I think you can put my book down to a morbid sense of humour.
So this has been a happy space. Thank you for being a happy audience. I exhort you to come and meet Steve and Hemangini at our book signing. Thank you very much.